Does that mean my audio is not coming through?
Oh, hello, Steve. Yes, sorry, I just had to restart the recording to make sure that I didn't have too much dead space to trim.
Being shaped by the needs of our technologies.
Aren't we always?
Yeah, well, yes, because I didn't. So I looked at my calendar and I saw my 11 o'clock appointment. And so I said, okay, I'll go take this walk and I'll get that in before that time. And then your message came in and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, did I forgot something? And that is like what the last 2 days have been. It's been reminding me of the deep coronavirus funk from a couple of weeks ago. When I couldn't effectively, I was just spinning in my head. So here I am out in my neighborhood. It's my park behind me.
Nice. So how is your level of funkiness?
I think taking the walk and doing a simple stretching yoga practice this morning are two simple steps to try to step out of it and walk away from it, literally. I mean,
yeah.
Just follow the metaphor. And I said, well, I have to do something. These are things I can do. But I don't wake up feeling that way. I don't wake up thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be a rockin' awesome day. Yeah, I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to go walk. No, I pause and I think this is a necessary thing to do regardless of how I feel right now. Let's just go do it.
There was a wonderful phrase I heard on the Veritas forum about endoskeleton versus exoskeleton. And he says, most people live in the exoskeleton of the structure and expectations of the people around them. I have a job, I have children, I have, social structures. And those people have been in a world of hurt during the COVID-19 crisis.
And that is exactly how I am responding to life and circumstances around me. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to make the audio route through my phone at the moment, because remember we had that conversation about technology just a second ago.
Whoa.
So you would think that I would have audio control somewhere. Oh, maybe that was it.
My internet is dying and I need to replace it, but at least I got that last sentence. Nope. No, now you're muted, so I can't. You're not saying anything either, so I can't hear you or see you. Oh, fun with technology.
Unmute.
Yes, you're unmuted. I can hear you but not see you. You seem to be clearer now.
And the story
again.
So visible and audible. So the story
you may have to hide your video. See if that helps. Okay.
So it's crazy what happens when you tap on your screen, which was the problem in the first place. So is that working? Because I see.
I can hear you now, and now you're clear. My internet connection is unstable, so I lost your audio. But
oh no, Ernie, you didn't lose the audio. That was me not knowing that on the little taps on the screen.
First I lost your audio, and then you muted yourself. So
yes.
It was both overlapping.
And so am I supposed to confess that I'm a technology guy that can't tap correctly on the screen, right?
No, there is a fundamental principle of life. There is no user error. There is only insufficient design.
Did you learn that at Apple?
Not the phrasing of it, but the philosophy of it, yes.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to when they first developed maps, or the reiteration of maps, and it wasn't quite what Steve Jobs had expected. He was a little upset, as the stories in Macintosh media go.
Yes.
So, my friend, how are you today?
I'm good. I been praying a lot, processing, pondering things, including our various conversations, and feeling excited and curious and hopeful and slightly anxious about whether we will be able to close the gaps that had been interfering with smooth communication between us. You used the phrase clanging iron, I think.
My new definition of iron sharpening iron, sometimes it clangs or clinks. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering whether clanging was a type of sharpening or the opposite of sharpening.
It is the opposite of sharpening. We are attempting to sharpen, but when you recognize that you're clanging, you're denting and damaging rather than refining. So it did occur to me.
Sharpening is a clearer contrast for me.
What is it? What's a clear contrast?
Denting versus sharpening is a nice stark contrast.
It is. It just struck me because I understood what our purposes are. I understand what our purposes are and why we're coming together, and how our discourse is designed to help us understand multiple viewpoints and to improve and sharpen our own thinking. And it has done that in some really remarkable ways for every guy in the group. I think you would agree with that.
At least for all the regulars. I'm not as, certainly I've seen that on all the regulars, and some of the more occasional ones, the jury is still out.
Yeah. Simply because we don't get to see the full context of that process for them.
But yes.
So that's understood. Yeah, we wouldn't know that about the guys who come in from time to time.
Yeah. So were you going with that statement, or do you just want to make that statement?
I'll go with that statement.
Okay. So the phrase that's been running through my head is practices. And I was thinking about the phrase, in fact, that's a good title for this episode, is relational practice. Because there's two parts of that. One is our technology shapes our communication and interferes with it and enables it in different ways, as we've been demonstrating in real time.
Yeah.
Public discipleship exercise. And then the second part is this idea of endoskeleton versus exoskeleton. And so I've been, we've been having some conversations, and then Tuesday was a really weird experience for me. And on the one hand, it's like, okay, I really want this group to not be about me, to be something that we all take ownership of. And I felt like we did that in spades on Tuesday, to the point where I have no idea what happened. And if I accomplished anything of value to anyone involved.
Oh, well, yes, I can say that the time was valuable for me, and that our participation in it together through the stimulus of your thinking and your thoughts were a valuable experience for me.
What was the value you got out of it? Out of curious.
Let me see if I can frame it two ways. The first way is, in the content, we were going through the concepts of systems, and whether or not you can look at a human system in the same way that you might look at a mechanical system, or and then say that again.
Or an ecosystem.
Or an ecosystem. So that was an interesting concept that I believe Eric had brought into the conversation. And so that expanded my, and I think they even used the word biologic. And then that really helped me focus on well, humans are a part of this biologic system. But there's a very, very important condition, in my opinion, when humans are involved in a biologic system. It is their ability to think and reason, the thing that elevates us above animals. So to look at an ecosystem and not and one must recognize that when humans are involved, humans are thinking and they're acting on their thinking or they're acting on their feelings. And that is a behavior that is very difficult to control, as we know from human history and our own life experiences. So to try to optimize an ecosystem with humans set me off in this direction like, you all are crazy. You can't even imagine doing something like that. The system has to be built around the idea that it is filled with flaws, and we're doing the best that we can to minimize the impact of the flaw. Not that the flaw is going to go away, but the impact of it upon one another. And impact goes two ways. It's how hard do I push against the thing that's pushing against me, and then how much do I flex to allow the thing that's pushing on me to give it a little bit of room. Therein lies my second point. 2 weeks ago, you Ernie opened up a door with David J, because he was pushing back on some logic and he was looking for consistency and congruency in some points that you were making. And you leaned back in the chair in a sense and kind of metaphorically, and you replied to him, this is good for me to receive that type of pushback. And I believe you suggested it helps you think. It helps you think through your own thoughts. That was about 2 weeks ago. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that was, I said David Johnson was at that point in time my favorite person.
Yes.
He gave me blunt, honest criticism.
So, and he did. And I chuckled and I went, wow, okay. And then I questioned whether or not I was just going along with everything you said because you said it. And I challenged myself to think, am I going along with this idea because Ernie said it? And because the flow of the conversation is going and I want to see where Ernie's thoughts are going to land. So I just quietly listen. And then I think the way my mind clicked, when I got onto that biologic ecosystem and the recognition that we are trying to change human behavior and you can't, the whole failure of school is that it can't regulate that. It tries to through using systems, and those systems will fail because it neglects the basic human need of each individual. It looks at the average of the person. Well, no average person is ever served by a system that's designed to meet the average need of a person. No matter how well optimized it is, it's optimized for the average. So, Ernie, we're like a Mobius strip. We keep going around and around the same type of an argument, and we're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to do anything. And all of this came together in a moment. And then you heard the moment as it escaped. When Ted said, I think Steve has something to say, it was almost like he turned the, what's that called? The pressure valve. He released it. He released it because I wasn't going to say anything. So if I were to summarize everything that I just said, it was the realization, we're having an intellectual argument. This reminds me of when I was in Stanford, and I hated those Stanford years. I hated them, Ernie. Hated them. So when you talked about not liking, or like you skipped out of high school and just go straight to college, and that some of your difficulties were with respect to what you remember from those challenging experiences, perhaps when you were in your tweens and teen years. I later thought about it and I went, oh, this parallels my experience in my undergraduate years at Stanford, where I'm suddenly surrounded by a bunch of intellectual elitists who are trying to gain points from the TA leader, from the teaching assistant in the small group sessions by talking all the time. And I tend to be more of a person who thinks and has a thoughtful reply. Well, that's too slow. It's too slow. So I couldn't win. It was very frustrating. The worst part of my entire experience at Stanford, though there were many other highlights, I don't look back on my freshman year world cultures class discussions with any sense of fondness. The only time I came to life in a discussion was when I was in my art classes and we were doing group critiques, and each person had an opportunity to speak. Each person spoke in turn, shared their ideas, received the critique from their classmates, responded to the instructor. structured, open conversation, try to build a sense of community around the idea that you're going to have to give some critical design analysis to a person and they may not like it. I did my best. I liked it a lot better than those open-ended discussions about books that I just chose not to read anymore because I couldn't understand them and I didn't want to argue with people because I don't like arguing. It all came together, Ernie. One steam valve release from Ted.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was definitely one of the high points of the conversation. Why are you laughing?
Because you catch me by surprise every time.
Right, which
in a way.
Yeah, and this is the weird thing is that like, I'm never quite sure if we're disagreeing on things, or if just you have a hard time believing I actually believe what I believe because I seem to keep surprising you with it.
I do believe you believe what you believe. So it's not, that isn't it. It isn't that you say something that I go, oh, heck, I had no idea Ernie believed that. It is your manner in which you can connect what you believe to the words, and then you share them at a moment in time when I went, oh, well, that isn't quite how I was feeling about it, but I really appreciate that Ernie was open to whatever it was that I had said and thought that it was a useful thing. Whereas for me, I think I've been learning about four communication levels recently. The emotional level, number 4, is all about feelings. And it has been characterized as the way that African Americans tend to respond to incidences of injustice against other African Americans. We tend to go into the number 4 level real quick. We get really mad, get incensed. And then our white siblings are at the number 2 level, which is the rational way of thinking. Now let's gather all the facts here before we do or say anything rash. We don't know the full story because there might be something else going on there. You know, pisses me off.
So what's just complete the loop. What are the third and first levels?
Oh, now you're asking me to be extra intelligent and I can't tell you because I only focused on the 2.
Okay, fair enough. Because that was actually, my therapist was working with me on this on Monday, which was actually incredibly helpful. And I think that is probably most of our disconnects is when one of us is trying to be rational and the other one's trying to be emotional. Occasionally it's when we're both being emotional, but
I like the idea that you think that I might actually be trying to be one thing or the other, when in that particular instance that we're talking about, that was just a reaction.
Well, no. What we're trying to communicate, and we're doing it in a way where we are, maybe not trying to, but we are focused on the emotional or logical problem that we're trying to address.
Yes.
And so certainly a big chunk of the problems in my life is when someone is articulating an emotional need and I try to respond with an intellectual argument.
Yes, that would be that difference I was describing between 4 and level 2.
Right, and to be fair, I like to think I'm a balanced human being in that I'm learning to make both kinds of mistakes with equal frequency.
You do wonderfully well, and in your self-reflection, you demonstrate such a high level of humility that it makes it easy to have this conversation today.
Right, and so I think that was actually, in the 20 minutes we have left or whatever, do you have a sense whether it's better to deal with the emotional issues or the intellectual issues?
Okay, Steve McGriff's opinion on that question with respect to what we're doing in the Great Reset. So I needed to put a lot more parameters around what you're asking. What I'm looking for is progress. I'm looking to work towards a solution that our group thinks would be helpful and reasonable. Caveat, the solution is a way of behaving, and then we should start behaving that way. Now, we could take a step back and we could begin behaving in certain ways anyway, leading up to what we then conclude is a good methodology, a good structure, a good ecosystem, whatever term, a good way of relating. whatever terms we want to use, it's how we would function as a group, and how do we choose to use our functioning for the good of others. So you now have heard what I'm looking for is progress towards a goal, a reasonable progress over reasonable time. And I'm looking for a way of living that serves others through the intellectual efforts that we are applying. Do you need me to unpack any part of that?
No, I think that was really helpful. So what's funny is that, let's just start with the word system, just to get it off the table, is that when you use the word system, like most people do, they usually think in terms of what I would call a formal system. Rules, regulations, precisely defined components to the village, right? And what I realized was when I use the word, I mostly use it in terms of a complex adaptive system.
Yes.
Like a biological system, an organism, an ecosystem.
Yes,
and
let's
so
keep going.
And what's funny is that you reacted negatively to my use of the word system for exactly the same reason I react negatively to your use of the word education.
Yes, I can see that point that you're making about the reaction to the word system, but I would like to add something. I don't know that I don't think I have an issue with system in itself. I'm going to take a guess that my reaction is more oriented towards, do we always have to disagree on the nuances of a word? Can we just get beyond this?
Okay. Was that a rhetorical question or was that a sincere question?
No, it's an explanatory statement about how I was feeling and what I was responding to, not only on Tuesday, but in the week before. And I can unpack that too for you if you would like.
Yeah, because I think the interesting word in that sentence for me is react.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the answer is kind of yes, is that we all have words that have emotional hooks for us. And if we had no emotional hooks, we would have no language to speak of.
Yeah.
And so I think the whole point, if there is any, to deliberative dialogue or argument or whatever you want to call it, it is to understand how the words I use mean one thing to me and a different thing to you.
Yes.
And we have to work through that if we're ever going to communicate.
Correct. So that's where I think that's called negotiating meaning. And as a group, we're doing that because Bill often will introduce new ways of thinking about terms. He will say, that was a term from the 60s. It referenced this. I would prefer to move away from that. Or he would say that was a term from the 1700s and it would be better not to use it in that way. And this is helpful to inform us. And I agree that what we're working towards is an agreement on the meaning. What I found myself feeling trapped in is we were never agreeing on the meaning of anything. We were constantly picking up new words and then not being happy with the way that word was used.
The question is, can we converge on a shared meaning, for a shared vocabulary so we can make forward progress?
Yes, which is, in my opinion, the nature of what a relationship is and how relationships form and are structured and how they come together. They don't always stay that way. But if it's built on the premise that we started from a mutual understanding of each other's language, I'm thinking specifically about my relationship with my wife and the language that I had to learn, not just in the dating component, but in the first year of marriage when she often just wanted to hit me and walk out the door. It didn't matter if we were in a worship service until I stood up and praised her. And then she had the conviction in her heart because I just told the whole congregation of her church of how much I loved and appreciated my wife. Somehow, Steve just responding emotionally got through her rational thinking about why she was mad and angry and frustrated with me because she recognized that she had married me for the foundations that my heart would continue to grow and love the Lord more and more all the time. Not because I was an intellectual who could reason and argue, and not because I was consistent in my communication, but she believed that I could grow. That's an awesome relationship. And I carry that through today as I work with my sons. I'm always a thorn in their sides. And I tell them, I am your thorn in your side. My name is Dad. You shall not live comfortably in my house when you don't act the way that I think you should be acting. Here, let me explain to you how you should be acting. Oh, here in Proverbs, it describes the sluggard. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm sorry. That might seem like a negative term. Well, let's just use it for a moment because it's pretty clear. This is me. This is me. I'm just saying, look, guys, I didn't make this up. I'm talking about relationship because that's the way God, addresses us. He didn't want to come down and say, here, have these rules and follow them. That was the last thing he wanted. The last thing he wanted was for a king to be placed over the people. He wanted the people to respond to him directly. He didn't want the rules and regulations and restrictions and oppression that kings bring. He wanted to serve as the king, but the people said no. Just like the people said, Aaron, make an idol for us to worship like the other peoples around us. They all have gods that they can see. And Aaron, in his stupidity, says, well, I'm going to forget everything that Moses and I talked about with God, and I'm going to throw this metal in this pot. Foolishness. Foolishness.
So I'm going to defend Aaron a little bit on this one, just because I think it's actually relevant.
What? You mean that he gave in to the whims of the masses?
No, let me be brutally honest about this. It's really hard to worship a God we don't see.
Absolutely.
And therefore, we who want to keep the people together, we as dads who want to keep our families together, it's really easy to say, hey, let me make this concrete thing and focus your worship and obedience on that in order to keep everything moving forward.
Yes.
And so this is actually the really, really hard problem that I don't yet want to claim I know how to solve. So I'm really reluctant to judge Aaron for it. Let me tell you, this is precisely the crisis I am facing right now with the Great Reset. Like, I felt like we got a lot of enormously useful information on Tuesday.
Yes.
But we probably also increased everyone's frustration with whether or not we're making progress.
Okay.
Right? So the easy answer to this is to go back to all the other systems I've been a part of, which have their golden calf. The Bible study. This is a teaching lesson. This is a discussion group. These are existing structures that are good for solving certain classes of problems.
Good point. Yes. Certain classes of problems, certain approaches to achieve certain kinds of behavioral outcomes. Yes.
Right. So the question is that, okay, I would like to achieve different behavioral outcomes.
Yes.
Which implies I need something different that, and so this is the hard problem I want to solve. And it's great because I have to solve by Tuesday to move forward, at least at some level. Right? So I have some pressure. I mean, I don't have to solve it, but I have to really solve it in my own heart where I feel like, yes, I am making progress in my understanding of it.
Ernie, I would cut you more slack and just say, let's just, if necessary, embrace the process that is in progress and that we're needing to iron out some topics if necessary.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe this is where I need to clarify my point. Like, that is the process. Like, the whole point of this whole thing is figuring out what is the, let me throw out another phrase again, relational practices.
Yes.
How do we want to practically live together in ways that help us get better at doing these things we say we care about?
Okay. I'm with you.
Okay, so that's actually my pitch. Is like the word system has all these connotations, and it blew up in my face when I tried to use it, and it may actually indicate a flaw in my thinking. because I do tend to start from the technical side and move to the relational.
Okay.
And maybe we'll be more effective if we do it the other way around.
But if that isn't your style, then you might be acting unnaturally to try to present the idea. Does that make sense?
Oh no, yeah, but well, yes, but that's a feature, not a bug.
Correct.
Right, because like my whole life I've done things the way I like to do them, and that's gotten me this far, and it will not get me any further. So, sorry, one of my favorite TV shows lately is the Arrow TV show. It's a really interesting modern Shakespearean take on the Green Arrow character from DC Comics.
Yeah, I think I've seen some episodes.
His tagline at the end of every episode is, in order to do X, and it changes, I must become someone else. I must become something else. And this is where it's exciting for me, in that this idea of transformative encounters with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, this is actually when it gets fun, is when I actually reach the total end of everything I know how to do and my existing way of doing things. That's when things get cool. Because that's when God has to work a miracle in my heart. There's a great line somewhere, is that an engineer gets excited when he realizes that someone has solved this problem before, so he can copy the solution. And a scientist gets excited when he realizes that nobody has solved this problem before, so he gets to invent a solution.
I like this comparative analogy.
Right, and they get depressed in the opposite scenarios. So here's my pitch, and I'll give you the 2-minute version, is that the thing that we are doing together is developing relational practices that help us do this thing together better.
Okay.
As a first step. And that and so the noun that I care about is relational practices.
Relational is good.
Right, and so you're talking about yoga, your morning. Actually, that's one thing that I was at an Indian resort over Christmas, and I decided to go to the yoga hut. And I don't think I've ever taken a yoga class. I've done some yoga videos. But the first question he asked me was, "What is your practice?" And I said, "I don't have one."
Yes.
So he made me breathe for like 20 minutes, and it kicked my butt just trying to breathe.
The way they described it to you, yes, yeah.
Yeah. But I like that framing of, like, when you meet another Christian, what if instead of we asking them, "Oh, what's your denomination?" or "What's your theology?" or "What's your beliefs?" or "What's your church?" we ask them, "What's your practice?"
Oh.
Because the thing I love about practice is this idea of, like, hey, actually, this is the problem it solves for me, right? I have a vision. I feel an obligation to the group to help them get to where they need to go, because they're showing up because they expect something. And I invited them, right? And like, for example, if I spent the entire hour just lecturing you all on my latest theories, that would break the social contract.
Yes, it would.
Right? So there is a social contract of sorts that I am responsible for creating. Like, Ted and I co-founded this thing. And so we shared the sense of responsibility that, like, okay, we have to live up to the social contract. The promises we made, if you don't like the word promises, whatever. Anyway, but I don't want it to be, so I can't just sit there and just hope it all happens. I have to act.
Correct. You're the catalyst.
Yeah, the catalyst. But not a catalyst. I'm reacting against the word catalyst, because a catalyst by definition is something that does not change while it changes others.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yes.
So no, that wouldn't be an accurate description of you.
Yes, but that is in fact how many people frame leadership. Is you, the leader, have the right vision of the future, and it's your job to change the rest of the world to conform to it.
Would instigator be a better term?
Instigator's a great one. The other chemical word that I've been playing with is reagent.
A reagent. I'm not as familiar with reagents.
But when you have a chemical reaction, the thing that participates in the reaction is a reagent. Like, oh, you need some more hydrochloric acid in order to interact with it, but it's not. It causes a reaction, but it is also consumed or perhaps transformed.
It's transformed in the process
of transforming the system, right?
Nice.
Okay, and so I said, so the question is that how do I build something? So the first failure mode is so there's 3 failure modes. One is the God King, worship me. So when we have a group of people who lack cohesion, one solution is the God King solution. Follow me, right? And what's interesting is that Adam, some of the theories are that Adam may be the same as the Sumerian kings that lived around 6,000 years ago. I mean, it depends. There's a lot of obviously emotional issues around that, but it's an interesting hypothesis just to look at. And even if you take it at face value, what's interesting is that all of his contemporaries were basically full time in the job, making themselves look like God. And Adam was the first guy in the business of saying, there is a good God, I am not him. And we need to follow that God. Okay? So what's interesting to me is that, okay, so there's a point, this idea of like, so one option is to be a God yourself. The second option is, Aaron's sin, which is to create a golden calf and say, hey, let's worship this thing. Let's worship this system, if you will.
Yes, right? Actually, a good way to put it.
Very much so, right? And then the third option is to build the golden serpent. Because it's the thing God told you to do right now to save these people from imminent death.
You're stretching my understanding. The golden serpent was a symbol used somewhere in the Old Testament.
Now, let me tell you the story real quick, right, for you and our listeners who may not know the reference. So Moses was leading the people of Israel. They were being real jerks. So God sent serpents to just bite them and kill them because he'd had enough.
Oh, right. Okay, good.
Right? And so then Moses goes and makes this golden serpent. And there's a great scene in the TV series The Chosen where like Josh is like, dude, what are you doing? That's a pagan symbol. And Moses is like, hey, God told me to. I got to do this. This is the thing to do. It's like, okay. That was absolutely the right thing to do.
Yes.
God told him to do it. Moses was obedient. And that golden serpent became an idol and a stumbling block later down the road.
But wasn't it used in the immediate context that Moses hoisted it in the air and the people were supposed to
looked to it and they were saved? And it was a type of Christ, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful thing, but it's also a frequency thing. And like Joshua was kind of correct. Don't you realize you're making now? Like, yeah, but this is what God told me to do. We got to do it. But it's like that doesn't change the fact that it's still a dangerous thing. And if we're not careful, it'll become the thing that we worship.
Because we lost the original meaning of what it was there for.
And what I'm arguing is that all the systems we have inherited in Western Christianity today, churches, schools, right? This is my negative critique. Right?
Yeah.
Me being perhaps cynical, but it's not really cynical. It's saying, look, these were exactly God's provision at that point in time.
Yes.
So we turn them into golden serpents.
Yes.
And now they keep us from seeing Jesus.
Yes.
Okay, and so the pitch is, so there's two meta practices that I want to start with. Right, so we talk about relational practices and about the practices. So one practice I want to start is we write down our practices. Like I thought that list of stories you were telling about how you dealt with various relational conflicts was beautiful and painful. Right? And you say, okay, it's like, let's write this down, not as a rule, not as a book, not as a sermon, but as a practice. Like, hey, when I encounter the situation, I try to do this so that I get this result.
Yes.
And and what's interesting about that, that's how we design computer systems. They're called user stories.
Oh. Okay.
And, you have a context, you have an action, and you have a result. And what's useful is that you can say, oh, I did the practice, I didn't get the result. Was it the wrong context?
Yeah.
Or was the result
Yes.
I got not actually what I was looking for? It's like, wow, you could build a system of iterative improvement upon that. And it solves a whole bunch of problems that I point to the practice and say, hey, we seem to be having this problem. Can we try this practice? And people will say yes or no. It's like, okay, we don't have to try that one, then we have to invent a new one. Or we have to redefine the problem. So it gives you a concrete thing. The point is that I don't want to be the one saying, do what I think we should do, but I have to point them to something. And so here's the second practice. So the first practice is writing it down, so it's an objectified thing that we can analyze and discuss intellectually to make sure it's meeting our emotional needs. But then the second bit, and we'll wrap up on this, is the second practice is encountering Christ through the cross. Because any practice, any system, any meta system will eventually become a golden serpent.
Yes, I'm with you.
And so therefore we need to have like a practice of taking whatever our current system is, formal or informal, and saying, okay, we are stuck. Let's go to the cross of Christ and see how he needs to change us or reality in order to move us forward, even if it means dying to everything we hold dear.
I like that. I think I would like to +1 that idea by adding maybe like step lowercase a. Filtering the context through Christ is beautiful. It's exactly what we need to do. But given that we are human, there's a sub-step A, and that is a process for reconciliation over disagreements on philosophy, words, or ideas, like what we are presently doing right now. If we don't agree for a process for how to disagree and or move forward, it will be difficult to always stick to A, or stick to the first part, which is, oh, I'll just talk to God about this. We need a human mechanism through which we bring God and our perspective of it together. Or we meet on, here, Ernie, we meet at the foot of the cross for a conversation like this one.
Yeah, and yeah, that's actually good, because I think that was like going to be the third practice, and now I'm wondering if maybe that should be 1.5 or whatever, right? Because
it could
like,
be.
once you write stuff down, then you have to have a process for arguing about it to ratify it.
Yes.
But then when you get stuck in that process is when you have to meet at the foot of the cross. Like, not every discussion has to be soul-rending transformation.
Correct.
Except for me, perhaps. But I'm not sure why it always works out that way.
Your heart begins to listen intently to your mind, and it reacts. It's just my quick summary of what I see.
Yeah, but I think it's also that I am bicultural. I live, I am liminal. Like, every system I am in, I seem to be the exception that proves the rule. I don't know why, but anyway. So anyway, it feels like we are converging on some terminology and some forms, and I feel like validated in like the first 3 items that I want to build as the foundation are resonating with you.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Yeah,
so
great conversation.
Yes, and this was itself good relational practice, which I'll probably use as the title.
Relational practice is I like the framework that, as we've just talked through it, it makes sense, particularly because we both emphasize that it has to be fluid in terms of how it works with respect to the dynamic of the one other or the others that are part of the relationship. And I agree that it can't simply be built upon curricular rules and processes, which, by the way, for me, curriculum is just a guideline for the artistry of the teacher to make into a masterpiece. It in itself is a masterpiece. It's just a framework upon which the teacher, in my education analogy, paints the canvas of learning.
It's a scaffold.
Exactly. And that scaffolding is actually a term we use in education.
Yeah. And so that's the idea of, yeah. So I think okay, you promised me 50 minutes and I've used 52. So I want to make sure we're.
Oh, yeah. I'll need to transition.
All right.
I also got to charge up the phone.
All right. Hopefully it won't explode into flames again or anything like that.
You notice I'm standing in the cool spot today.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm feeling incredibly encouraged. I hope you are too.
I am, Ernie. I find you a wonderful brother to have conversations with that can move me beyond my anger and frustration of Stanford colleagues to the type of relationships that I always felt Christ could fulfill if I just found the right guy. So that is why I wrote you a little message after making some contentious statements that I knew were contentious. I said, I love you. Because how I was feeling and responding did not diminish my love for the man that I see that you are and who you want to be. And I thank the Lord for you. Simple as that.
That was a holy moment, Stephen. Thank you.
We should talk more about spiritual gifts one day, and I could share more with you about that.
You want to take for or against?
I don't know if there could be a more perfect closing to this conversation than that line right there.
All right. Mic drop.